Well, grace and peace, everyone. We need to talk about Sunny Hostin and what she stated the other day concerning profiling and the lengths she went through in order to prevent her son, who is training for the Olympics, not to get profiled. She stated that her son is training for the Olympics. They live in a predominantly white, more than likely gated community or something. And she said she went to the police, took her son up there, who is 18 years old, introduced him to the police, and said, he's going to be running around the neighborhood training for the Olympics. So I just wanted to let you know. And, a lot of people took issue with it. They were like, okay, that's bizarre, and that's just going above and beyond what's needed. Why would she do something like that? And a lot of people thought it was performative, and I do think it was performative, especially given that, one, everyone knows who she is. So I'm pretty sure their community knows who she is and her kids. And they probably talk about them all the time. So seeing a young 18-year-old fit young man who happens to be a person of color, dressed in running attire, running down the street, is more than likely not a big deal. It's not. It's really not a big deal. Now, a lot of this goes back to the case a few years ago, and I saw the video of this young man who was shot by the police down in Georgia. The young man had on some khaki slacks. He had ashy knees. He was walking. He traipsed into a building that was being constructed and then ran out, started jogging out after he went into this construction. And then that resulted in a chase by people who lived there and whatever else. And, I guess they were police officers off duty or something, and he got shot. What they didn't show you was that young man, that particular young man, I forgot his name because it's not important. There's some other videos of that same young man. Now, anyone, if you saw that young man in your neighborhood, you would probably get alarmed. No, he did not look like, he had on running attire and he was going out for a jog. They beefed that story up. And I think that's what Sunny Hostin is pulling from. you know. But at the same time, knowing that she lives in some northern city somewhere, and I guarantee you, because I live in a predominantly white town, there are mostly there's a pretty good blend. There's a lot of whites, there's blacks, and then there are mixed race people, mostly from the islands, Cape Verde Islands, and there are a lot of Latinos. So you don't know who you're looking at, to be very honest, especially when it comes to nice tan, buttery brown skinned people like myself. So you don't know if you're looking at a Dominican or whatever else. And Sunny Hostin's kid, more than likely, based on the way she looks and her husband looks, probably has that same type of look to him. You know, so seeing a young man like that in a community, dressed up, nice and clean, going out jogging, knowing good and well the story about his family, nobody's going to stop him, you know. But I also think there's more to it because Sonny, just like any other black person, mixed race person who is interconnected in the white community, because in the North, these communities are very segregated. You see each other at school, you see each other maybe if you go to their churches or whatever else, but they don't go to church, so it's not like they're interacting that way. If you go to the YMCA or you go out shopping, you might see each other and stuff. But other than that, they pretty much stick to themselves. You know, you may think that because you're in a northern city that, oh, everyone is running around and, you see black men dating white women and you think everything is hunky-dory and okay, but it's not. It's always been a very racialized type of existence in these northern areas particularly in places that have Ivy League schools. All right, and I'll get to that. So, in many cases, although maybe not, Sunny probably has a little bit of privilege because of who she is and because of her money, and they'll see her and they'll brown nose her a little bit. She's acceptable. Her kids are acceptable. But Sunny tries to place herself in the everyday, average Black American or mixed race American existence in a predominantly white community, and such is not the case. Because at a certain point, it goes from being racism to classism. And you can experience that from both sides, whether or not it's people like Sunny Hostin, people, other Black people in the community, other white people in the community. In these northern towns, that's just how it is. And most of what you're feeling a lot of times is classism, you know? But also, one of the things, and this is where the whole affirmative action, DEI, living in an area with a lot of, Ivy League schools come into play. What I believe about DEI and affirmative action is that it gives white liberals in northern areas the ability to cherry pick the people they want in their areas. Because if you eliminated all of that stuff and you had a really good candidate or something, or someone that wanted to participate in something, and just suppose it was a regular, ordinary, well-spoken Black woman who maybe mixed race or something, and she has all the criteria. She's never marked Black on her applications or anything. She is what she is. She's not presenting a race. She's not racializing her existence. Nothing. If she shows up in a predominantly white area, she may not be accepted. She may not be accepted because she doesn't fit a stereotype of what they want to see. She's not controllable. She's not going to defer. She's not going to, accept them trying to impinge different things on her, you know, stereotypes and whatever else. And she's probably going to be a little problematic if you make certain comments to her. And I'm probably talking about myself. Yes, I am not going to take kindly to certain comments. I'm probably going to push back as opposed to ignoring them. Sometimes I ignore them. Most of the times I don't. However, when they get the ability to cherry pick, okay, people they feel comfortable with, they always tend to pick people that they can hold something over their head so that they can use it to eliminate that person in the future. So they may say, well, you know what, I don't like Black Americans, so, let me just cherry pick this Nigerian or this Kenyan, this African or this Caribbean or, maybe a Cape Verdean or something. They're better. I like them. They're better people. They're more like our people. They're similar to us. That's all it does. It gives them the ability to cherry pick who they want in an area. At the current moment, as far as landscaping, working in their houses, cleaning their houses and whatnot, they want to cherry pick Hispanics, Latinos. They want immigrants from other countries to do that kind of work because they feel as if those people they're going to play on the desperation of those people. And they're going to hold it over their heads. You do what I say. They can talk to them any kind of way. They can conjure up stereotypes. They can, do all kinds of stuff that they normally would not do to someone who is well aware and has been in this country for generations upon generations. And it happens so much in northern cities. When you come up here, I came up here from the South. And my family is originally from South Carolina. I was raised in New York, but I came up to New England in 2001 to work at a local hospital. And it was a Jewish hospital. And you would not believe some of the ignorance and some of the different things that I experienced when I first came here. Like, for example, when I first came here and decided to accept the job permanently, I, man, I milked that contract for about 2 years, right? I stayed on contract for 2 years, which means that all of my housing and my car and everything is paid for. But when I decided, okay, this might be a fairly decent area for me and my son, so let me just go ahead and take the job permanently. And I went around looking for, a house to rent when I first got here. And I stumbled upon a house that was like right across the parking lot of the hospital. And I said, you know what, that's pretty good because at least if, I have to pull a call or something, I can just get dressed, run across the street. It's not a major thing. I'm right there. And let me go ahead. So I went and I looked at the house, and there was this Arab man that was showing me the house. Now, I don't know who he is. All I know is that he's trying to rent this house out. And I go in there and I look at it. It has all kinds of colors all over the wall, purple, dark purple, yellow, all kinds of weird stuff going on. And a broken window, and I'm like, this needs a lot of work, and I'm looking and I'm thinking about it and I'm like, okay, and I'm thinking, needing something really quick and whatever. Maybe I can take it, maybe I can fix the window myself or something or whatever. So we get out and he says, well, I do have someone else looking at it, so I'll be in touch, which is not normally how it goes, especially in a house like that. So I said, sure. Never heard from him, right? So one day, one of my directors is showing me around the hospital. Actually, it was my medical director, and he takes me into surgery and introduces me to the doctors there because the doctors need to know the techs that are going to be working directly with them, and sometimes you do have to go in surgery with them. So he went ahead, he introduced me to them, and then while we're coming down the hallway, there's this man, and I recognize him, right? And my medical director says, oh, Dr. So-and-so, let me introduce you to Day, and she's going to be working with us, blah, blah, blah. And his face about fell off. I said, oh, I think we've met, and just sort of looked at him. In other words, to give them that notion, you know what, I should burst you out right now and let them know exactly how you behaved. I didn't say anything, I just looked, but he was sort of, I guess, I don't know, he was very anxious. You could see it in his face. Like, oh, I thought she was going to be one of the blacks, and I didn't want one of the blacks renting my damaged destructive looking house across the street from the hospital. You know, he just assumed a lot of different things about me and then had to eat his words when he saw me walking up the street with his peer in a lab coat and it being introduced to him like I'm somebody special. Oh, who is this? So whether or not it's the whites, the Hispanics, or whatever, they all have like a cliquey way of living. So if you're not dealing with classism, you're dealing with some kind of preconception. And if they haven't had the opportunity to sort of march you around like this doctor did, I'm not saying that was a bad thing because you do need to know who you're dealing with. But it's almost like people cherry picking the people that are allowable in their environments. You know, cherry picking and presenting you so that you don't have a problem. And we know that that is going to be a problem. You may be a problem to some people, so I can understand that. But they get to cherry pick the black people they want in their areas and the black people they don't through their hiring practices, through who lives in the area, who lives in the environment, who's at where, and this is just how it is, and they are like that in the northern areas. So I think what happens when you get people like Sunny Hostin, you get a lot of these commentators, you get a lot of other people who always want to talk about racism, but they're married to white people in many cases. It's like, how, if they're so bad and you don't like them so much, why are you always talking about them? You know, you're married to one. So how does that all play out? And the reason why it plays out is because they are enmeshed in an environment where they get to hear the reality of what goes on with a lot of these white liberals who will go out and march and, do some kind of stupid no kings march or sit with some ukuleles and knee pads and knee highs on and sing about, these old fashioned um, protest songs that they've taken from the civil rights era and now they want to apply it to immigrants. But these are the type of people. You may see them at these No Kings rallies. You may see them, with the banter and railing against Trump. But when you're in their inner circle, you see exactly how they are, exactly how they treat you, exactly how they treat your children. They are not innocent at all. In fact, you'll probably deal with more racism and more classism in the northern areas, New England, places, that have institutions like Brown or Yale, all of these little areas where they live, where most of the white liberals, where they, proclaim themselves to be the most educated and the most aware. They are some of the most racist people and classist people on the face of the earth. And it extends. It's not only Black Americans. And that's another thing. A lot of these people that, Black people, for them, Black people are just something to use in an argument. Now, they don't live around actual Black Americans. They don't want Black Americans in their workplace. They don't want you in their hospitals, in their institutions. They don't want you in their colleges. They don't want you in their Ivy League. What they do have are cherry-picked people from African countries or the Caribbean or, Latino countries. And they'll pass these people off as Black people. But they don't want Black Americans there. But yet, you'll see someone like the other day I saw uh, there was some commentary from Chris Murphy, Senator Chris Murphy, I think it is, and he was talking to a man that's going to be appointed the ambassador for South Africa. And he was talking about, you know, refugees from South Africa, usually the Boers and different people that have been allowed to come over to the United States. And suddenly, although this is about an ambassadorship position, this white liberal decides to ask him, well, would you be in favor of not allowing black people to vote? Well, first he said non-white people to vote. And then he said Black people to vote. Now, that position of allowing South African refugees has nothing to do with Black Americans. It seems as if white liberals love to hang on to this totem of Black American struggles from the civil rights era, slavery, and so forth. And when they need to push a narrative, whatever the narrative it is, whether or not it's their pet favorites of the moment, whether or not it's trans people, whether or not it's immigration or something, they always take you know Black pain, Black problems from the past, hold it up into the light, and act as if you know this is an issue when what they're talking about has nothing to do with Black people. But what they expect Black people to do is say, "Oh, he said Black," perk up, and next thing you know, you're supposed to go running out with them to fight against this perceived oppression of immigrants and Latinos and whatever else. And they'll say things like that, but you always notice how they always like to invoke the image of Black people. But in most cases, whether or not it's Connecticut, whether or not it's Rhode Island, Massachusetts, or whatever, they will do this all day, every day, but ask them if they actually know a Black American or they're actually close to one. They aren't. They don't want you really near them. They gossip about them badly. They say all kinds of things. They conjure up all kinds of stereotypes. And even if you are trying to enjoy the lay of the land, whether or not it's walking on those trails, whether or not it's going to museums, whether or not it's just taking your kids out to try and be, you always have to deal with an undercurrent of looks, assumptions, people watching, hypervigilance, being monitored and surveilled because they placed you in the category of undesirable. So anyone they placed in the category of undesirable, that means that that person is a danger, that person is a threat to the environment because you haven't been cherry picked by them to be there. And how dare you exercise the autonomy of actually coming into an art museum? What are you doing here? We need to ice you out and make you feel uncomfortable. So when I see a lot of these protest rallies and all of these people, crying over immigrants and going out and, shedding tears and, trying to place themselves as freedom fighters and, talking about Dr. King and all this stuff, you don't even live, you don't even have a friend that's remotely related to that era because you don't want to be near them. You've assumed you have the bigotry of low expectations, and you would much rather just handpick and cherry pick the people that you want in your area. A few here, sprinkle a few here. The other ones, no, they need to stay over there. And trust me, even if it's not the greatest, it doesn't even have to be, this posh, super posh, uber rich environment or something. It could be, you could be surrounded by, just people who own businesses or something. And just suppose you're just retired now after 30 years and they don't know that you're retired because they don't know your life. They don't know who you were before you decided to just throw in your sweats and go walking on the trails and hitting go bird watching every day. They may have assumptions about you and you find yourself, they surveil everything you do. Oh, you bought a new car. How did she buy a new car? I'm driving this lowly van in the back and she's got a brand new car. Why does she have a brand new car? You know, Looking in your windows, all kinds of stuff. It's weird. It's weird. It's really weird. And that's how it is. And that's probably why Sunny Hostin, you know, feels as if she needs to overreact to something, knowing good and darn well what she probably hears on the internet. Now she's on the inside. There's this little thing when you are on the inside. You're privy to the conversations and stuff that they have. Well, not you, but I'm just saying that a lot of them like to do so and so, and a lot of them, and they make comments. They say all kinds of things, and I'm pretty sure, being lighter skinned and being, half Latino, they probably have said some things in front of her that she probably wouldn't dare repeat because she didn't say a damn thing when it was being said. But she knows. And I don't know how her son looks or whether or not he came out with the hair. But if he came out with the hair, she probably has this fear of him being profiled because she knows what they say, the classist shit that they say when they're amongst their own and they're cherry-picked individuals. So I'm not going to say much more about that. I just wanted to get this off of my chest because I know exactly how they are. I have never had negative experiences like this in the South. The difference between the people up here in the North and the people in the South, they talk about evangelicals and, try to say that they're racist and whatnot. But at least with an evangelical, if they're racist against you and they know that you share a common worldview, maybe you're a Christian like them and they see that you're actually living a wholesome life, then they can say, okay, well, you know what, she's all right. I like her. You know, she thinks similar to us or whatever else. It's not a major deal. Up here with the godless liberals, liberals can only rely on stereotypes. There's no come to Jesus moment to where if they've followed someone in the store or, looked at someone that lives in their neighborhood as, a potential threat or something and locked their doors or something when they're walking past, God forbid. There's no come to Jesus moment when they see that person, in the hospital right next to them, working with them, to where they say, oh, God, forgive me. I was wrong about that person. They never have that come to Jesus moment. At least an evangelical will have a come to Jesus moment. They don't, because they don't believe in it, you know? So I'm just saying that they are not who they say that they are. They may be on the left, they may talk all of this yin yang about rights and, this, that, and the other, but it does not spare anyone when they push all of this legislation to make themselves feel good about the stuff that they do on the ground to people, to individuals. In the front, they'll say, we like well, we like them, we like the blacks. But individually, they don't like you individually. At least in the South, they may love the person, hate the race. In the North, they hate the race. They hate the person and love the race. So this is why you always see them invoking black people and civil rights leaders and the things that have happened in the past. They hate the people as individuals, but they love saying that they love black people because they like to use black people as a totem. That's all I'm saying. All right. I'm out of here for the day. Ciao, ciao, and have a great day.